Okay, class, we're starting now on the integumentary system. The integumentary system. The integumentary system is a system which is made up of organs. What are the organs of the integumentary system? The skin, the hair, the nails, the glands, and certain nerves. Now recall that an organ can be in two systems because nerves would be in the nervous system, but they also, those associated with the skin can also be associated with the integumentary system. Okay? These are the functions that you have. Protection, obviously it's a covering. Reservoir for blood. You have quite a bit of blood in that surface area in the skin there. That can be gained or lost, which helps with thermoregulation. Immune, there are immune cells in there. Excretion, remember the difference between excretion and secretion. Excretion is getting rid of a wasteful product. So oil and sweat would be that. Synthesis of vitamin D, we'll talk about. Okay, so these are the functions of the integumentary system. So it's more than just a covering. Remember that, it's more than just a covering for protection. Okay. The protection, they're barriers. Some of it, okay, so here's how you would look at it. Before you even get to the skin itself, the first layer of your skin, if you're coming from the outside, you have secretions out there. And some of those secretions have defensive action. For example, an acidic pH, what would that do? Kill off bacteria. Defensins, that's a chemical that retards bacteria. Dermacidin is in your sweat. That would be on top of the skin. That would kill bacteria. Bactericidal stuff in sebum. Sebum is your oil. And if you wound the skin, ketocetins are produced. And they help prevent group A strep. Remember, if you get burned severely, that layer of skin will be gone, and so bacteria can invade. Now, we really hit this hard and heavy in ANP2 when we talk about the immune system. So here are some of the things we just mentioned. Ketocetin, you can glance at it. Don't get real heavy on it. Dermacidin, German researchers found that this was something that can kill 4 kinds of bacteria and some fungal species. Physical mechanical barrier. Okay, we're going to see in these videos, I don't know how many we'll have for skin, but that keratin and some of the glycolipids that you have, keratin protects you against water and it protects against mild acids and so forth. Glycolipids block more water. You needed this keratin and glycolipids. Think about it. In the hot summer in Texas, what would happen? You would lose all your water through the skin. I'm not talking about through the sweat glands. I mean just evaporating straight through the skin. You'd be dehydrated quick. So this keratin and these glycolipids prevent water from just escaping out. They also prevent water-soluble stuff from coming in. Okay? That's why most pesticides are water-soluble, so they can't go through your skin. So, now, lipids can go through the skin. So but keratin and the dead skin cells on top kind of prevent some of the lipids, but lipids can go through. Okay? And then we have some biological dendritic cells, macrophages, and we'll talk about. Okay? So this barrier. All right, we go further. Chemicals that can penetrate the skin, lipid soluble. Remember, water you kept out, water and water soluble. So that would be things like A, D, and K, the fat soluble vitamins, steroids like estrogen. That's why females can use topical estrogen, olestrins, things of this nature, of certain plants like poison ivy, poison oak, so they can go straight through. Organic solvents like acetone, so forth like that there. That you would use, doing houses and so forth. Salts of heavy metals like lead and mercury. Nitroglycerin, it can go through. You can use nitroglycerin patches. Nicotine patch, you've heard of that. Okay. Some drugs are used to help take things through the skin, like cosmosporin. That helps stuff that's topical to go through easier. But lipids, think about lipids. Water soluble are held back because of the keratin and the glycolipids. DNA has been found to be, DNA is genetic, we talked about it, but it itself can kind of act. Electrons in DNA can absorb UV radiation and transfer it to the atomic nuclei, which heat up. However, since this heat dissipates to the surrounding water in the area, the DNA converts destructive radiation into harmless heat. So DNA itself in the skin cells, So just pointing some stuff. Something to keep in mind, those that do some painting and so forth. Organic solvents like acetone, which can clean up paint, dry cleaning fluid, paint thinner, which dissolve the cell lipids, and heavy metals like lead and mercury are devastating to the body and can be lethal. Passage of these substances through the skin into the blood can cause kidneys to shut down and cause brain damage. So don't handle them with your bare hands. That's the bottom line there. Okay, let's go further. Functions. Body temperature regulation. Should I say much on that? We did that in chapter 1. If you're in a cold environment, then the blood vessels in the skin will vasoconstrict and shut the blood to the core under the fat layer. If you're in a hot environment, you'll have vasodilation to dissipate the heat. So we talked about that in chapter 1. Again, you can read in the text again if you'd like. Cutaneous sensations. We have thermoreceptors in the skin. We have touch receptors in the skin. We have pain receptors in the skin to sense that outside environment. Okay. Here is an example, we'll come over here, of some of these nerve endings that you see there. These are some free nerve endings. We'll talk more about this in the nervous system, but this is like this right here is for like fine touch and so forth. Hair follicles. So, if you wave your hand across your skin, but don't even touch it, those hair follicles will bend and tell you have a light touch. But on skin that doesn't have hair, you say, where is that? The palms and the soles. Then you have these receptors here for light touch. Okay. Here's some others right here for more deeper touch, pressure sensations, things of that nature there. Again, just to show you the senses as far as to be able to signal the outside environment that we have in the skin there. Okay? Let's go a little further. Metabolic functions. Synthesis of vitamin D. Synthesis of vitamin D. Now, sunlight is important in vitamin D, but let me kind of point something out to you. So let's go here. We already talked about enzymes and everything. Okay, so vitamin D is a steroid hormone. So cholesterol, which if you recall, go back to your chemistry, is a steroid. It's actually a sterol. Enzymatically can be converted to dihydrocholesterol. That's in some cells that you'll know about shortly, known as the stratum basale and stratum spinosum. So those cells have the enzymes in them to convert cholesterol to this. 7-dehydrocholesterol in those cells I just mentioned can be converted to cholecalciferol if ultraviolet B, UVB you'll know about, is present. That's where the sunlight comes in. UVB we'll talk about. Now that will make something called vitamin D1. Vitamin D1. This cholecalciferol is vitamin D1. It has no function. It's an intermediary. It has no function. It's an intermediary. Then it gets into the circulation, leaks through the cells, and then cholecalciferol, which was D1, can be converted to 25-hydroxycholecalciferol with liver enzymes when that substance passes through the liver. That's vitamin D2. Again, vitamin D2 is an intermediary. Then when 25-hydroxy goes through the kidney enzymes, is converted to a 1,25-dihydroxy, which is D3. Let's highlight D3, ladies and gentlemen. D3 is the active form of vitamin D. D3 is the active form of vitamin D3, active form of vitamin D. So sunlight only does part of it. If you had adequate sunlight, but you had trouble with the enzymes in the liver or the kidney, you still wouldn't get vitamin D produced in your body. You still would not. You still would not. So then you'd have to be constantly taking it from the outside. Okay. Of course, if you're in an area of the world where there's very little sunlight, you still gonna have to be taking it from the outside. Okay, so that's that vitamin D. Okay. Now, blood reservoir. Up to 5% of the body's blood volume is circulating through the skin. The skin has a lot of area. And then excretion, you lose things in sweat, salt, and so forth that we'll talk about. All right. So we go further. We already did that. Keratinocytes can disarm many cancer-causing chemicals that penetrate the epidermis. Okay. Activate some steroid hormones. For example, if you go to the drugstore, put cortisone on the skin, it can be converted to hydrocortisone, which is highly anti-inflammatory. Okay. All right. We'll go further. There's something on wrinkles. All right. So here we are now. We're saying that the skin, the cutaneous membrane, that's the other name for the skin. Remember, chapter 4, cutaneous membrane. Remember the synovial membrane and so forth like that. The mucous membrane. Well, the skin is called the cutaneous membrane. This is about the surface area, but this is on the standard human, the 70 kilogram person. 70 kilogram, 5'8". Okay, don't worry about how much body weight. Okay, the composition of the skin. Cutaneous membrane. You need an epithelial layer. That's the epidermis. Then remember, all epithelia rest on a basement membrane or basal lamina. In this case, a basement membrane. And the type of basement membrane it has. So in other words, and some call this the dermal epidermal junction. The dermal epidermal junction. Remember, on a membrane, you have to have an underlying layer of connective tissue. And that would be the dermis. So the dermis is connective tissue. We'll be going through that and looking. All right, let's go further. So when we look at it, the cutaneous layer, let's just look at this. The cutaneous layer is the epidermis and dermis. Now, the hypodermis, hypo below, is not part of the integumentary, but it is, part of your body wall. So the hypodermis can be called the sub-Q. The hypodermis can be called the sub-Q. It can also be called something called the superficial fascia. Because and we'll get to this when we do muscle, talk about muscle. But the superficial means above. That means if you have a superficial fascia, you have a deep fascia. So those going into nursing, they're going to give injections. If we say a sub-Q injection, that means under the skin and into the hypodermis. So the hypodermis is not part of the skin. It is termed 3 names: hypodermis, subcutaneous layer, sub-Q, and superficial fascia. Okay? The hypodermis is your fat layer. It's the fat layer. Right? Here again is a picture of that skin. So we have the epidermis, the dermis, and so forth. We'll be looking at that in more detail. Okay? Now, the epidermis is a keratinized stratified squamous. Keratinized stratified squamous. So I'm going to end this video right here, and we're going to start at the epidermis. So my next video, which will be Integumentary video 2, will start at the epidermis.